The message from the Galactic Council came without warning. One moment, humanity was part of the grand network of civilizations stretching across the stars, trading, exploring, learning, and the next, they were told they no longer belonged. The Council's voice, cold and measured, echoed across every human colony and outpost. By unanimous vote of the Rulers' Assembly, the species known as humanity is hereby exiled from the Galactic Accord. You are to withdraw from all shared territories within one rotation cycle. Resistance will not be tolerated. It wasn't a declaration of war, but it felt like one. At first, there was silence. On every human world, from the glittering domes of Mars to the ocean stations of Europa, people stood frozen, their screens flashing the same message. Exile. No explanation, no hearing, no appeal. Just a quiet, formal banishment from the galactic family they had worked so hard to join. Some thought it was a mistake. Others believed it was punishment for humanity's rapid rise, for daring to outpace species that had ruled the stars for millennia. But beneath the confusion, something older stirred. A quiet, familiar defiance. The Council expected begging. They expected humans to protest, to plead for mercy, to fall in line. They didn't understand the species they were exiling. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice. Within hours, their colonies began shutting down the gates voluntarily. Ships packed with equipment, archives, and personnel left orbit. Factories went dark. Trade stations emptied. Humans didn't ask why they were being exiled. They simply prepared for what came next. Because if the galaxy no longer wanted them, then humanity would find somewhere new. Somewhere beyond the reach of the rulers' laws. Across the stars, alien diplomats whispered in disbelief. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't rioting. They were leaving. Entire planets coordinated mass evacuations, as if it had been planned all along. Convoys of freighters and warships moved with eerie precision, forming vast flotillas headed toward uncharted space. The Council had expected resistance, maybe even violence, not this cold, methodical withdrawal, but humanity had learned long ago that when doors closed, they built their own. There were quiet moments amid the chaos. Families saying goodbye to worlds they had made bloom, engineers sealing the last airlocks of stations that would never see life again. Soldiers watched the stars fade behind them, knowing they might never return. Yet none of them felt defeated. Exile, after all, wasn't new to humans. From ancient times, they had been cast out, forced to start again, and every time they had come back stronger. The Council might have thought this exile would erase humanity's influence. They were wrong. It was the spark of something far greater. Behind the scenes, whispers of betrayal grew louder. Some suspected that not all the Council's members had agreed willingly. A few alien envoys who had worked closely with humanity vanished overnight. Defectors, perhaps, or silenced. There were rumors of secret votes, of manipulation by unseen forces who feared what humans were becoming. But by the time anyone dared to investigate, Earth's fleets were already gone. They had turned their backs on the galactic heart and set their sights toward the deep frontier, a region the Council itself feared to explore. In the quiet halls of the abandoned Terran embassy on the galactic capital, a single message was left behind. No threats, no anger, just a few simple words written in multiple alien languages. You made your choice, now we'll make ours. It spread like wildfire through the networks before the Council could censor it. Billions of beings across the galaxy read it and shivered. There was something unsettling about how calm it sounded. Not vengeful, not desperate. Just a quiet promise. Because when humanity left, they didn't just take their ships and technology. They took their ideas, their spirit, and their unpredictable will to survive. And the galaxy had seen, time and again, what humans could do when they were cornered. Months passed. The regions once full of human colonies grew silent, replaced by drifting stations and darkened trade routes. But beyond the outer rim, Strange signals began to appear. Unknown frequencies, vast energy readings, movements of fleets that didn't match any known species. Some claimed it was humanity rebuilding, creating something new, something powerful. Others dismissed it as rumors. But deep down, the Council's leaders began to worry. Humanity's disappearance hadn't slowed their progress. It had accelerated it. Free from regulation, free from oversight, they were now experimenting, expanding, uniting in ways the galaxy had never seen. The exile that was meant to humble them had instead unleashed them. And somewhere beyond the galactic edge, they were preparing for something the Council couldn't predict. On one of the last recorded transmissions from the frontier, a camera caught a glimpse of something massive, an orbital ring under construction around an unnamed star, its scale dwarfing any known engineering feat. The footage was grainy, distorted by interference. But one thing was clear. The humans were building something the galaxy wasn't ready for, something that didn't look defensive. The rulers' assembly convened again in secret, their once confident tone replaced with unease. Reports flooded in, human scouts spotted in forbidden systems, strange beacons pulsing from the dark between galaxies, old outposts reactivated with new technology. Yet none of it made sense. Exiled species weren't supposed to thrive. They weren't supposed to expand faster after being cut off. The Council had expected compliance. Instead, humanity had become a ghost empire growing beyond the stars. Whispers began to circulate among younger species, whispers of humanity's return. Some even said the humans were reaching out, not for vengeance, but for something else entirely. A reckoning, perhaps, or an invitation. But no one could be sure. The Council banned all discussion of humanity under penalty of exile, yet the stories only spread faster. Because deep down, every civilization that had voted for Earth's exile was beginning to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. And somewhere, far beyond their reach, the humans watched. They remembered every insult, every dismissal, every law passed to slow their progress. They remembered how they had once been told to stay in their place. Now, they were beyond anyone's reach, charting the uncharted, building in silence, growing stronger in exile. They hadn't declared war. They hadn't even replied to the Council's message. But the quiet that followed spoke louder than any fleet. Because when humanity finally decided to return, they wouldn't ask for permission. The galaxy thought exile would end the human story. They didn't realize it was just the beginning. And out there, beyond the edge of mapped space, a single human voice whispered through the static. Not angry, not afraid, but calm and resolute. They voted us out. Fine. Let's show them what happens when you cast out the builders. The signal cut off after that, leaving the galaxy in silence. But across the stars, one unshakable truth began to settle in the hearts of even the oldest civilizations. Humanity never waited to be told twice. And this time, they weren't coming back as the same species the Council had tried to exile. Because exile doesn't end a story. Sometimes it rewrites it entirely. And the galaxy was about to learn that the hard way. When the humans vanished beyond the mapped stars, the galaxy began to change in ways no one could have predicted. Trade slowed, scientific exchanges thinned, and the once vibrant flow of ideas across species began to dry up. The Council had hoped that without humanity's relentless energy and unpredictable drive, things would return to order. But what they didn't realize was that humans had become the heartbeat of that order, the restless pulse that pushed civilization forward. Now, with them gone, the galaxy felt quieter, and not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that felt like the moment before a storm. At first, life went on. The rulers' assembly held their meetings as usual. The great powers, the Cathari, the Soluun, the Voreen, continued to trade resources, debate politics, and pretend everything was fine. But beneath the surface, something was off. Entire sectors once maintained by human engineers began to break down. Automated systems they had built stopped working, and no one could quite figure out how to repair them. Humans had always left their mark. Hidden layers of code, clever shortcuts, systems that somehow ran better than anyone understood. Without them, the cracks were starting to show. In the far colonies, smaller species began to whisper. They remembered how humans had shared knowledge freely, helped build infrastructure, and stood by them when the Council ignored their pleas. To them, humanity's exile wasn't justice, it was theft. And those whispers grew louder when strange signals started reaching the outer listening posts. Unidentified transmissions, faint but structured, carrying rhythmic pulses that matched human communication patterns. The Council dismissed them as interference, but not everyone was convinced. Among the few who still dared to speak openly about humanity was an old alien scholar who had lived on Earth for decades before the exile. He had studied humans up close, not through reports, but through life among them, in their cities, their schools, their chaos. He warned the Council that humanity wouldn't fade quietly. They adapt faster than any known species, he said. When they lose their home, they build a new one. When they are cast out, they make the void their ally. But his words were ignored. The Council believed exile would break humanity's unity. They thought humans were too divided to survive without guidance. They were wrong again. Deep in uncharted space, humanity was doing what it always did best, rebuilding from the ashes. The fleets that left Council space had carried more than people. They carried data archives, genetic repositories, blueprints for every invention humanity had ever created. But more than that, they carried memory, the unshakable human instinct to endure, to push forward no matter how impossible the odds. On the edge of a dying star, they began constructing massive rings that would form the foundation of new habitats. Others spread to nearby systems, terraforming worlds that no other species had dared to touch. They worked in silence, not because they were hiding, but because they had learned that the galaxy wasn't ready to listen. And among them were the veterans, those who had once served as diplomats, engineers, and soldiers under the Accord. They remembered the day the Council voted. They remembered the calm faces of the rulers as they signed humanity's exile into law. But instead of rage, they felt something colder. Resolve. They knew that the galaxy had made a choice out of fear. Humanity had advanced too quickly, adapted too unpredictably, and now the old powers were afraid. So they would let the galaxy live in its fear, until the humans were ready to return. Meanwhile, the Council began noticing new patterns. Small colonies along the outer trade lanes were being abandoned, not by humans, but by aliens. Entire populations quietly packing up and leaving without explanation. No distress signals, no requests for aid, just empty worlds. When scout ships were sent to investigate, they found traces of human-made technology. Not weapons, not invasions, just infrastructure. Systems designed to improve atmosphere quality, boost food production, stabilize weather. All left behind, active and functioning. It was as if humanity had silently returned, not to conquer, but to upgrade. Back in the deep frontier, the first of the exile worlds began to thrive. These were human-built colonies far beyond the known maps, powered by technology generations ahead of anything the Council could understand. They didn't rely on Council trade or galactic networks. They were fully self-sustaining, their cities powered by stars themselves. The humans called their new civilization simply the Continuum. It wasn't an empire. Not in the old sense. It was a shared project. A living network of people who believed exile wasn't punishment, but opportunity. But not all humans agreed on the same path. Some still held anger, not against the Council directly, but against the arrogance that had led to the vote. They believed humanity's return should be a reckoning, not a reunion. And quietly, in the dark edges of the Continuum, factions began forming. Some sought peace and exploration, others prepared for something far less forgiving. Humanity was united in exile, but the question of what to do with that unity still lingered like a shadow. Then came the first undeniable sign, a transmission intercepted by an automated council relay. It was short, encrypted, and traced from beyond known space. It contained no threats, no demands, just an old human proverb, spoken in dozens of alien dialects. "We do not fear the dark. We built our home there." Panic spread through the assembly. The rulers held emergency meetings behind sealed doors, debating whether to prepare defenses. But there was no army on the horizon, no visible fleet. Just the quiet, unnerving knowledge that the humans were out there, building something unimaginable. Some rulers even began to question the vote itself. Had they made the right decision? Or had they, in their fear, set into motion the rise of something they could no longer control? Meanwhile, reports continued to leak from the outer rim. Glimpses of colossal human structures, ships moving in formations the Council's sensors couldn't track, energy readings that defied known science. Every time the Council tried to suppress the rumors, more appeared. The galaxy that had once cast humanity out was beginning to look toward the dark, wondering what waited there. And humanity, scattered among their new worlds, watched quietly. They didn't rush. They didn't announce themselves, because they knew time was their ally. The rulers might have had the power to exile them, but they could never stop what made them human, the relentless will to survive, to build, to dream bigger than anyone dared. The humans had left the galactic stage, yes, but they hadn't vanished. They were simply writing a new chapter, one that the galaxy wasn't meant to read yet. "They voted to exile us," the voice said quietly. "So we left. But when they look up at the stars again, they'll realize we never stopped watching. We never stopped building. The next time they see us, it will be because we decided they were ready." The lights dimmed, and the silence that followed wasn't of defeat. It was the silence before history turned. Humanity was not gone. It was waiting. In the Council's high chamber, tension filled the air like static. The room that once echoed with proud declarations now pulsed with unease. The rulers tried to appear composed, but their calm was brittle. Reports from the outer sectors kept arriving. Colonies with no human presence were finding strange devices buried beneath their soil, machines that repaired local ecosystems, or satellites that reconnected broken communication networks. Humanity had left behind a trail of quiet gifts, and now those gifts were waking up. No one understood their purpose, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. It felt deliberate. Out on the frontier, a cargo captain named Hale was one of the first to see them, or at least he thought he did. His small freighter was carrying supplies to an uninhabited mining station when a massive shadow crossed his ship's sensors. No warning, no identification signal. The shape was too big, too advanced, and moving too fast. For a second, his radar failed completely. When it came back online, there was nothing there. Just the echo of something massive leaving behind a faint pulse of energy unlike any known propulsion system. He filed a report, but the Council classified it immediately. Hale never saw a response, but he knew what he'd seen. Humans. Back on Earth, or what was left of it, the planet was quiet. The cradle of humanity had become more of a monument than a home. The few who stayed behind lived among the ruins of ancient cities, maintaining the old archives and communication relays that connected to the continuum. They were the keepers of memory, ensuring that if anyone came searching, they would find the story intact. It wasn't nostalgia, it was duty. Earth was the origin, the reminder of how far they had come and how much further they could still go. Among them was an archivist named Ilara. She had never seen the galaxy beyond the home system, but she had heard every story. How the Council had betrayed humanity, how her ancestors had left to build something greater. Every night she sat beneath the quiet sky, looking at the faint lights of the orbital platforms that still circled the planet. She often wondered if those who had gone beyond the frontier ever looked back, or if they had truly moved on from the world that had once cast them out. One day, a transmission reached Earth's archives, encrypted, faint, and older than her own lifetime. It contained only fragments of coordinates and a voice that sounded human but distorted, like it had traveled through time itself. The message said, "If you receive this, they've begun to move. The Council's unity is fracturing. We knew it would happen. Keep the old systems alive. They'll need them soon." Then the signal cut off. Ilara decoded the coordinates. They pointed toward the edge of the Perseus Veil, far beyond any current map. That was where the Continuum's largest ringworld was rumored to be. Meanwhile, in the heart of Council space, power struggles began to surface. The Exile had been a unanimous vote years ago, but now whispers of regret spread among the factions. The younger species were restless. They saw opportunity in humanity's absence, but also danger in their silence. A few wanted to reach out to the humans, believing that rebuilding relations could stabilize the galaxy again. Others wanted to double down, to prepare for possible confrontation. What no one dared admit openly was that the Council's strength was fading. Without humanity's innovation, their technologies stagnated. Without their ambition, their unity crumbled. Far from those political halls, the humans of the Continuum were facing their own conflict. They had built something magnificent, worlds powered by stars, cities suspended between planets, and fleets that moved without sound. But progress came with division. The Continuum's leadership had split into two schools of thought. One believed humanity should remain isolated, focusing on creating a new civilization untouched by the old order. The other believed they had a responsibility to return, not for vengeance, but to restore balance to a galaxy that had fallen into fear and stagnation. Among the latter group was a fleet commander known only by her call sign, Sable. She had been a child when the Exile happened, raised on the ships that fled the Council's reach. To her, the Council wasn't an enemy, it was a relic. What she feared more was what humanity could become if it stayed hidden too long. "Isolation breeds arrogance," she told her crew during one meeting. "We left to grow, not to vanish." Her words struck a chord, but they also stirred tension. Not everyone agreed. Many feared that returning would reignite the same hatred that once exiled them. Sable brought the message to the Continuum Council. Debate erupted instantly. Some wanted to respond, to send envoys back into Council space. Others argued it was a trap, a way to lure them into conflict. But Sable believed the truth was more complicated. The humans had been exiled because the Council feared what they might become. But now, the Council feared what they already were. Back on the galactic capital, those fears were turning into paranoia. Surveillance fleets were being deployed along the frontier. Every unidentified signal triggered alarm. Even within the Council itself, factions began spying on each other, suspecting infiltration. One ruler even claimed that humans were already among them, disguised, observing from the shadows. It was dismissed publicly, but in private, no one was sure. Humanity's legend had become so vast that even rumors carried power. Yet amid the tension, something extraordinary was happening. Across dozens of planets, ordinary people, scientists, miners, traders, were beginning to dream of the same image, a blue-white star surrounded by rings of light. It wasn't a natural dream. It spread like a shared memory, reaching species that had never met. The Council tried to suppress it, but the dreams kept coming. Some said it was a signal, others said it was an invitation. And far beyond their reach, at the heart of that very ring world, humanity's leaders were watching the data too. They knew the dreams weren't coincidence. It was part of something larger, something woven into the fabric of their new technology, a frequency designed to reach minds across the stars, not to control them, but to awaken them, They called it the recall. It wasn't time yet, but soon humanity would return, not as outcasts, not as conquerors, but as the storm that the galaxy itself had summoned through its own fear. The Council's exile was supposed to end the human story. Instead, it had only ensured that when humanity came back, the galaxy would never be the same again. And out there, beyond the faint light of the known stars, the builders waited, silent, patient, and unyielding. The galaxy was holding its breath. Every signal, every transmission, every whisper carried the same undercurrent of fear and anticipation. Humanity had been silent for too long, and silence, especially human silence, was never a good sign. The Council had doubled its border patrols, fortified its communication relays, and recalled fleets from distant sectors. Still, they couldn't shake the feeling that all of it was pointless. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't arrive through the usual channels. Humans never attacked where you expected them to. They always came from the direction no one was watching. Inside the Continuum's vast ring world, lights dimmed as the Council assembled. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with the hum of energy from the planet-sized reactors below. Sable stood before the others, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Around her, holographic projections of different sectors flickered. Regions where human signals had been detected, council fleets had gathered, and strange disturbances had begun spreading. She looked at them all, then said quietly, "They're panicking. That means they're preparing for something, and that means time is running out." The Continuum's leader, an older man who had been part of the first fleet that left Earth, spoke with the weight of centuries in his voice. "If we move now, we risk everything we've built. But if we wait, they'll turn the entire galaxy against us again." His gaze lingered on Sable. "You think this time will be different?" Sable didn't hesitate. "Yes, because this time, we're not the ones who are afraid." Far across the void, in council space, unrest had become chaos. The younger species had grown tired of the ruler's paranoia and secrecy. Civilizations that had once worshipped the Council's authority now began questioning their leadership. Protests turned into riots. Colonies declared independence. And through it all, strange signals continued to pulse through the networks. Short bursts of data that couldn't be traced. Some claimed they carried human code, others said they were warnings. The Council tried to shut them down, but the signals adapted faster than they could react, spreading like wildfire through the galactic communication grid. On the galactic capital, a diplomat named Vera stood at her observation deck, watching the city lights below flicker. The once proud skyline of the Council's core world looked fractured, as if the weight of its own arrogance was pulling it apart. She had always believed in the ideal of unity, but now she wasn't sure what that even meant anymore. In secret, she had been communicating with someone from the outer rim, someone who claimed to be human. Every message came through hidden channels, encoded with patterns only humans could have created. That night, she received another transmission. It was short, a simple phrase repeated 3 times. "The recall begins. Prepare your world." Then silence. Vera's heart pounded as she leaned against the window, trying to make sense of it. Prepare for what? A war? A return? Or something in between? Meanwhile, at the edges of the known galaxy, the first signs of movement began. Ships, massive, silent, and unlike anything seen before, started appearing in deep space. They didn't use standard propulsion. They didn't transmit any signals. They seemed to bend light around them, emerging like shadows between stars. The few who managed to catch glimpses described them as living metal, their hulls constantly shifting as if alive. They carried no insignia, but no one needed one. Everyone knew what they were. Humanity had returned to the edge of the map. The Council called them ghost fleets, but the truth was far more unnerving. They weren't attacking. They were watching. Every time a council ship approached, the humans simply vanished into the dark. Every time they tried to trace a signal, it disappeared. The humans were moving faster than the council could react, and the mystery was tearing their unity apart from within. In the continuum, debates raged. Some leaders demanded open contact, others urged caution. The younger generations, those born in exile, were restless. They had never seen the galaxy that once rejected their ancestors. They wanted to know it, to face it, even if it meant conflict. Sable, watching the growing divide, knew that time was slipping away. A message arrived at the central command of the continuum, a visual feed this time, rare and deliberate. It was from an unregistered council vessel. The image flickered, and Vera's face appeared, pale but determined. "If you're listening," she said softly, "they're preparing something. The rulers are planning to strike first. They think they can trap you. But there are still those of us who remember. Please, don't let them destroy everything." The message ended abruptly. No coordinates, no return signal. Just static. Sable stared at the frozen frame of the diplomat's face, her expression unreadable. "They're scared enough to make the first move," she murmured. "That means they've already lost control." Still, the council wasn't done pretending to be in power. They began mobilizing fleets at the borders of known space, surrounding the uncharted sectors believed to hide human settlements. Thousands of ships, armed and ready, waiting for an order no one wanted to give. Across the galaxy, every news network, every data stream buzzed with one question: would the Council attack the exiled species it had once banished? On the Continuum's outer colonies, civilians watched the distant stars, their skies glowing with the faint light of assembling fleets. For the first time since exile, fear crept back into human hearts, not of defeat, but of repeating history. They had built so much, dreamed so far, only to face the same hatred once again. Sable stood on the observation deck of her ship, the Solace, as it hovered near the border of Council space. Below her stretched a world newly built, a symbol of what humanity could create. But now it was at risk. Her fleet stood ready, silent and disciplined. She wasn't looking for war, but she knew it might come anyway. Humanity didn't start fights. They finished them. Her second-in-command approached. "Do we respond if they open fire?" Sable didn't answer right away. The stars outside shimmered like distant memories. "No," she said finally. "Not yet. They still think we're a threat they can manage. Let's not prove them right until we have to." Far away in the Council's war chamber, panic was spreading. Reports came in of ships malfunctioning, navigation systems shutting down, communication relays going dark. Some believed it was sabotage. Others thought it was coincidence. Only a few realized what was really happening. The humans were interfering with their systems remotely. It was quiet, precise, and impossible to stop. One admiral slammed his hand on the table. "We can't just wait for them to strike. We need to send a message before they surround us completely." Another counselor leaned forward. "You don't understand. They already have." As tension built across the galaxy, something extraordinary began happening again. Another signal, stronger than any before. It reached every inhabited world, every network, every listening post simultaneously. It wasn't words this time. It was music. A simple melody, ancient and unmistakably human. It wasn't threatening, it was haunting. A sound of both mourning and defiance. For hours it played across the stars, and then, one by one, human ships appeared in visible range of the Council's fleets, unarmed, drifting slowly as if waiting. Their hulls bore no weapons, only a single glowing emblem, the symbol of Earth. The Council froze. No one knew whether it was a peace gesture or a warning. Back in the Continuum, Sable stood in silence, watching the transmission. "They'll either understand," she whispered, "or they'll make the same mistake twice." And across the galaxy, as the fleets faced each other in the endless dark, everyone, human and alien alike, felt the same weight in their chests. The exile was over. The galaxy's oldest fear and its greatest hope stood face to face once again. The next decision, from one side or the other, would decide the fate of everything that came after. But for now, there was only silence, heavy, waiting, alive with the promise of what was about to begin. The fleets hung in the void like a breath held too long. On one side, the gleaming armadas of the Galactic Council stretched in endless formation, weapons charged but silent. On the other, the human ships drifted in quiet defiance, unarmed yet unyielding, their hulls reflecting the pale light of distant suns. Between them, the galaxy seemed to stand still, waiting for the first spark that would decide everything. But instead of firing, humanity did something no one expected. They transmitted coordinates. The signal was clear, universal, and impossible to block. Every Council ship received the same data packet, a set of star positions leading to an uncharted system beyond the frontier. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a demand, it was an invitation. For hours, the Council argued over what it meant. Some believed it was a trap. Others said it was a peace gesture. But no one could explain why humans would risk everything just to send coordinates. In the end, curiosity won. A small reconnaissance fleet was sent to investigate, carrying scientists, diplomats, and guards. The entire galaxy watched the mission unfold through public channels. Even the Continuum observed from afar, silent and still. When the fleet arrived at the coordinates, they found something that defied every law of known physics. Orbiting a small, unremarkable star was a structure so vast that it dwarfed entire moons. A network of rings, lattices, and glowing spheres connected in perfect harmony. The sensors couldn't comprehend it. Energy readings overloaded instantly. It wasn't just a station, it was alive. The ship's commander reported in disbelief. It's not human, at least not entirely. The design, the materials, the scale. It's beyond anything they could have built in just a few centuries. The transmission cut off abruptly after that. Then silence. Hours passed. The fleet vanished from sensors as if swallowed by the light. The Council panicked. They sent another fleet, then another. None returned. Whatever the humans had built or found wasn't just hidden, it was unreachable by normal means, and yet the signals continued to echo from that same system, growing stronger each day. Inside the Continuum, even Sable and her command were caught off guard. The coordinates hadn't come from them. Someone, or something, else had sent them using human encryption. "Who has access to that code?" she demanded, scanning the records. But no one knew. Every data trail led to dead ends, systems that had been offline for decades. Then came another signal, this one directed not at the Council, but at the humans themselves. A voice, faint and distorted, but unmistakably human. "You built the gates, but you didn't build them first." The words spread through the Continuum like wildfire. Historians and engineers worked non-stop, tracing old data archives, forgotten transmissions, and deep code layers buried in ancient technology. And what they found chilled them. Long before the Exile, before humanity's rise into galactic society, there had been remnants of an older structure buried deep beneath Earth's crust. Metallic alloys not native to the planet, fused with the rock, undated by any method. They had always assumed it was debris from a meteor or old experiment. Now it looked like something far more deliberate. Sable gathered her officers in the command hall, the holographic projection of the unknown structure hovering before them. "If this is true," she said quietly, "then the Exile wasn't the beginning. It was a continuation of something we never understood. Somewhere across the galaxy, deep in Council space, Vera listened to similar reports from the few scientists who still trusted her. They had intercepted fragments of the same transmission, though parts were missing. What remained suggested that humanity hadn't just stumbled upon the technology that powered their ring worlds, they had rediscovered it. The humans had been using something ancient, something older than the galaxy itself. The Council's paranoia turned to fear. Suddenly, their exile no longer looked like a political decision. It looked like containment. As the truth began to unfold, the galaxy trembled with uncertainty. The structure in the uncharted system was no longer just a curiosity. It was awakening. Every day, new energy bursts rippled through nearby space, creating distortions in gravity and light. Fleets sent to observe were torn apart by invisible forces. The continuum began receiving distress calls from both human and alien outposts near the region, describing reality bending around them. Time skipping, stars flickering out, systems vanishing from navigation maps. Sable watched the data unfold with growing dread. "Someone's activating it," she said. "But who?" Then came the impossible. From deep within that anomaly, a new transmission appeared, this time accompanied by an image. It showed a human face. Not from the continuum, not from any known colony, but someone ancient. The expression was calm, almost compassionate. The voice said, "We were here before the stars. You just remembered how to build." It wasn't just a recording. It was live. And it wasn't coming from inside the continuum. It was coming from within the structure itself. Sable's blood ran cold. Whoever or whatever this was, it was using human language, human DNA, and human encryption. But it was older than any record of the species. "Are we sure that's us?" one officer whispered. Sable didn't answer. Deep down, she didn't know. The Council, desperate and frightened, decided on an extreme measure. They authorized the detonation of a stellar warhead near the anomaly, an act that would destabilize the entire region of space, but they believed might stop the structure from fully activating. They justified it as containment. The continuum intercepted the plan minutes before launch. Sable's decision was instant. "We can't let them do it. If they destroy that system, we might lose whatever's left of the truth." She ordered her fleet to move. For the first time since Exile, human ships powered up their weapons, not for attack, but for protection. The Council misinterpreted the movement as aggression. The fleets engaged. Energy flares erupted across the void, lighting up the dark between worlds. It wasn't a war yet, but it was close. Humanity's silence was over, and the galaxy was seconds away from reliving its worst fear. And then, as the first volleys exchanged between ships, everything stopped. Every engine, every system, every power core froze. The stars themselves dimmed. A voice, deep, resonant, and everywhere at once, echoed across all channels, in every language, reaching every mind. The exiled and the rulers, both blind to what lies beneath your stars. You woke the memory that sleeps within you. The choice was never yours alone. The signal cut through every firewall, every defense, every barrier. It was inside ships, systems, even biological implants. No one could shut it out. The voice was neither male nor female, neither human nor alien. It was something vast, ancient, and aware. In that moment, the humans and the Council realized the same terrifying truth. The structure wasn't just a human creation. It was a relic of something older, something that had once touched every world before recorded history and then vanished. Humanity had merely been the first to rediscover it. The galaxy erupted into panic. Some saw it as prophecy fulfilled, others as apocalypse. The continuum's sensors showed space itself warping around the structure as if reality were being rewritten, and through it all, the mysterious human face appeared once more on every display. "We left you fragments so you would find your way back," the voice said softly. "But you forgot what you were meant to awaken." Sable stared at the projection, her heart pounding. "What are you?" she whispered. The figure smiled faintly. "The first builders, and you the last." The transmission ended, and for a moment, there was silence again. Deeper, heavier, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath before something irreversible. The Council's warheads were still armed. The Continuum's fleets were still positioned for defense. And the structure, now fully awake, began to pulse with light brighter than a sun. Whatever it wasn't waiting anymore. And in that instant, every being across the galaxy understood. Humanity's exile had never been about fear of what they might do. It had been fear of what they might remember. The stars began to shift. The air crackled with energy, and somewhere deep within that light, the true beginning of the end had just awakened. The light from the awakened structure expanded until it filled the void like a second sun. Every ship, human and alien, was caught in its glow, frozen in awe and fear. The stars themselves seemed to fade as the energy rippled outward, bending space into shapes that shouldn't exist. Inside the Continuum's command ship, Sable stood still, shielding her eyes as the sensors overloaded. She had expected destruction, maybe even the end of everything. But instead, she felt calm. The voice returned, softer this time, like an echo that came from everywhere and nowhere. You have carried our seed through silence and flame. Now choose what you will become. In that moment, the human and alien fleets drifted closer without firing. The weapons that had been armed seconds before were now powerless, drained of energy by something they couldn't comprehend. Sable's crew tried to regain control of their systems, but nothing responded. Across the channel, even the Council's admirals were shouting in confusion. Then, a transmission cut through the chaos. It was from the Council flagship, Vera's voice, urgent and shaken. Sable, if you can hear this, we're losing containment across every reactor. The structure is pulling power from all ships. It's feeding on us. Sable looked at the holographic display. The energy readings were climbing fast, beyond any known limit. It's not feeding, she said quietly. It's synchronizing. The structure pulsed again, and in that instant, something incredible happened. The walls of reality rippled. Every human on every ship felt a sharp sensation behind their eyes, like a memory trying to surface. The same images flashed through millions of minds at once. Vast cities floating in the void, golden rings spinning around dark stars, and beings that looked human but not quite, walking among them. They saw the first builders, the ones who had come before, who had created the gates and vanished into the dark. And then, a realization struck like lightning. Humanity wasn't just a species that had risen from Earth's soil. They were remnants, descendants of something far older, scattered across the stars and forgotten by time. Earth had not been their birthplace. It had been their refuge. The truth shattered centuries of belief. Humanity's exile hadn't been punishment. It had been destiny returning full circle. The Council had voted to cast Earth out because deep down, they feared this truth. They had found traces of it long ago, hidden in data fragments, but suppressed it to keep the balance of power. As the memories poured into their minds, Sable stumbled, gripping the console. She saw flashes of another time, another self. She remembered building gates, mapping galaxies, and sealing something away in the dark. And now, it was awakening. The voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't distant. It was inside her mind. You were the ones who chose silence. You buried the memory to keep the stars safe. But silence cannot last forever. The structure's energy peaked, and suddenly every ship began to drift toward it, caught in its gravitational pull. Alarms screamed, and the void turned bright white. Sable's crew shouted for commands, but she stayed still, her gaze locked on the growing light ahead. "No more running," she said softly. "If this is who we were, we need to face it." Across the fleet, humans began to accept it. They stopped fighting the pull. The alien fleets, however, panicked, trying to break free. Their ships broke apart, dissolving into energy as they neared the light. Vera's voice crackled again through the comms. "Sable, tell me what to do. Tell me how to stop this." Sable hesitated, her heart pounding. "You can't stop it," she said. "But maybe we can guide it." She placed her hand on the console, letting the light engulf her. The human fleet followed, each ship connecting to the structure's signal through instinct more than logic. Then came the shift. Time slowed, the stars blurred, and the universe seemed to fold inward. For a heartbeat, there was no sound, no motion, only pure awareness. Every human connected through that moment, sharing thoughts and memories like a single mind. They saw themselves as one people, not divided by planets or politics, but by a shared origin that went back before recorded history. The structure began to transform. The rings rotated faster, forming a vortex of light that opened into a vast tunnel of shimmering energy. It wasn't a weapon, it was a gateway. The same kind the first builders had used before vanishing. Sable's voice echoed across the fleet. "This is it. They left us this choice, to finish what they started or close it forever." The Council fleets tried to intervene, launching what few weapons still worked, but their attacks vanished into the distortion. Their systems couldn't even detect the humans anymore. To the Council, the continuum was fading, dissolving into light. Sable watched as the vortex expanded, swallowing debris, ships, and even starlight. For a moment, she wondered what lay beyond. Another universe? Another time? Maybe even the builders themselves, waiting for their lost children to return. Then came the twist. The unexpected tremor that changed everything. A shadow appeared within the vortex, vast and slow-moving. It wasn't mechanical, nor entirely alive. It looked like a living network of light, ancient and endless. And it was waking up. The structure hadn't been calling humanity home. It had been calling itself back into existence, using humanity as the key to reactivation. The voice that had guided them began to distort, merging into something deeper, almost mournful. "You remember, but you do not understand. We were the builders, yes, but we were also the gatekeepers. We sealed away what should never return. You have opened it." Sable's blood ran cold. The energy readings spiked again, far higher than before. Whatever was inside the vortex wasn't coming through. It was already here. Vera's transmission returned one last time, broken and filled with static. "Sable, the Council fleets are collapsing. Whatever this is, it's rewriting the stars. You have to stop it." But Sable understood now. The structure wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to reset. The builders had built it as a fail-safe, a last resort in case the universe itself began to decay, and after countless ages, it had activated again, using the only surviving fragments of their creation: humanity. The Continuum's ships began to break apart, not from damage, but transformation. Their hulls turned translucent, glowing softly. The humans on board felt their bodies lighten, their thoughts stretch beyond flesh. They weren't dying, they were evolving, merging with the same network that once belonged to the builders. Sable's last words before vanishing into the light were barely a whisper. "We were never exiled. We were waiting to come home." The vortex consumed the human fleet entirely. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it collapsed into a single point of light and vanished. The surrounding space fell silent. The Council fleets drifted in confusion, their instruments blank, their sensors blind. The star system where the event had occurred no longer existed, replaced by an expanse of empty space and a faint afterglow, like a fading heartbeat. Weeks later, Council explorers returned to the site. There were no wrecks, no debris, no trace of the human fleets. Only a lingering resonance, repeating a single message in every known language. "The exile is over." And then, far across another edge of the galaxy, a new signal appeared. It was faint but unmistakably human. Coordinates again, pointing toward an entirely new region of space no one had ever mapped before. The Council hesitated, unsure whether to follow. Some feared what might lie there. Others believed humanity had transcended, become something greater, perhaps the next builders. But one thing was certain: the humans had not been erased. They had become something the galaxy could no longer contain. And somewhere, beyond the reach of known stars, a voice whispered softly into the dark, half promise, half warning. "We remember who we were. Now let's see what we can become." The light faded slowly, like the end of a long breath. When it was gone, the galaxy felt quieter somehow. The space where the human fleets had once stood was empty, but not lifeless. There was a stillness that seemed to hum faintly, a whisper that carried through the void, soft and distant. For the first time in ages, the Council fleets lowered their weapons. The war that had almost begun was suddenly meaningless. Something larger than any of them had unfolded, and none of their laws, fears, or politics could touch it. Vera sat in her darkened command chamber, the only light coming from the faint pulse of the residual energy still flickering on the main screen. Her crew was silent, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Reports came in from every sector, about gravitational anomalies settling, about missing stars returning to their orbits, about systems realigning as if the universe itself had repaired small fractures no one had known existed. And in the middle of it all, one simple truth echoed through every frequency: humanity was gone. Or rather, they had changed. At first, the Council tried to explain it. Scientists proposed that the humans had entered a higher dimensional phase, their matter converted into energy. Religious leaders across the galaxy called it ascension. Some whispered that the humans had been taken by their ancestors, the builders, to a new realm where they would continue their work. But deep down, everyone knew the same thing. The humans had chosen to evolve, not to conquer or escape, but to complete what had been left unfinished long before history began. In the following months, the galaxy began to shift. Without human presence, trade routes changed, borders weakened, and old rivalries lost their purpose. The Council's authority fractured, replaced by smaller alliances that no longer feared the idea of exile or rebellion. Many had learned from the humans' final act: the courage to face the unknown instead of hiding behind rules and fear. Vera watched it all unfold, unsure if this was collapse or renewal. She couldn't forget Sable's last words. "We were never exiled. We were waiting to come home." They repeated in her mind like a quiet promise. Vera ordered her flagship to remain near the edge of the sector where it had all happened. Every day, her sensors scanned for any trace of the continuum, and every day the readings came back empty, until one morning they didn't. A faint signal appeared, weak but deliberate. It wasn't a distress beacon. It was a transmission in old human code. When decrypted, it contained only a short message and a single image. The message read, "We're still here. Look up." The image showed a field of stars. But as Vera stared, she noticed the pattern. The stars weren't random. They formed a new constellation, one that looked unmistakably like the symbol of the continuum, the same emblem once painted on the hulls of their ships. That night, the skies above dozens of planets across the galaxy displayed the same constellation. It wasn't just in one place, it appeared everywhere at once. The pattern of stars shimmered faintly, like an echo of light that refused to fade. Some said it was a natural phenomenon caused by the distortion left behind. Others believed it was humanity's final message, a mark left on the fabric of the universe itself. But Vera believed it was more than that. It was proof that humanity had not disappeared. They had simply moved beyond reach, watching, waiting, guiding silently from a place no ship could travel. Over time, the galaxy began to remember them differently. The once feared species, the unpredictable exiles, became legends. Children learned stories about the humans who stood against the vote of the rulers and refused to be caged. Entire academies were built to study their technology and philosophies. Their writings, preserved through the Continuum's archives, spread through every world, inspiring generations to think differently about what it meant to belong. Humanity's legacy was no longer about conflict. It was about curiosity, resilience, and the willingness to change. Years passed. Vera grew older, her hair silver under the soft light of her command deck. She had long since stepped down from her position, choosing to live among the frontier worlds instead of the Council's sterile cities. She spent her evenings looking at the stars, the same ones that now bore humanity's mark. Every so often, the faint shimmer of the constellation would pulse once, as if responding to unseen rhythms in the galaxy. And each time she felt the same quiet comfort, that somewhere out there humanity was still moving forward. One evening, as she watched the horizon from the observation platform, a new light appeared. It wasn't bright, just a soft blue shimmer hanging above the clouds. It pulsed in a slow rhythm. 3 short flashes, 2 long, then 1 short. Vera's heart stopped for a moment. It was the same communication pattern the Continuum used for identification, ancient, unmistakable. She didn't alert anyone. She just smiled faintly, whispering, "You always find a way back." The light faded, leaving behind only the stars. In the years that followed, small traces began to emerge across the galaxy. Strange structures appeared in uninhabited systems, smooth metallic rings orbiting barren moons, towers of unknown alloy rising from forgotten worlds. They carried no markings, no origin data, but every scientist who examined them agreed. They matched the design principles of the ancient builders, and among them, some discovered faint engravings that translated simply to "made by the children of Earth." That was how humanity returned, not as conquerors or victims, but as creators once more. The galaxy didn't know if these new structures were messages, gateways, or monuments, but they understood the meaning behind them. Humanity had chosen not to vanish, but to rebuild quietly, guiding life forward in ways unseen. Vera's final years were spent recording her memories, trying to preserve everything she had witnessed: the exile, the awakening, the transformation. Her last entry ended with a simple reflection. "We feared what they might do, but in truth, they reminded us what we all could become. They didn't leave us behind. They lit the path." After her passing, her journals became part of the galactic archives, read by countless generations. And with each passing era, the legend of humanity grew, not as a tale of war, but of renewal. The story of the exiled world that rose beyond fear became a reminder to every species that progress begins not with control, but with courage. Centuries later, explorers following a faint gravitational anomaly discovered a massive structure hidden in the far reaches of interstellar space. It resembled the old human design, but on a scale even greater than before. No one could enter it, but when their ships approached, their systems filled with an unfamiliar melody, soft, wordless, yet distinctly human. It played for exactly 1 minute before fading into silence. The explorers recorded it and sent it to every world. It became known as the Song of the Builders. The melody carried no words, yet those who heard it often described the same feeling, a deep warmth, as if the universe itself remembered something beautiful it had once forgotten. The Council, now transformed into a loose alliance of free worlds, held a moment of silence in their honor each cycle, under the constellation that still bore the mark of the Continuum. And somewhere, beyond the reach of ordinary time, among the infinite lights of distant stars, humanity continued to move. They built, they learned, they remembered. Their exile had not been a punishment. It had been the first step toward becoming what they were always meant to be. The galaxy never saw them again, not in flesh or fleet, but their presence lingered in every echo of the stars. For those who listened closely enough, the silence between worlds was never truly empty. It carried a whisper, a promise older than any empire and stronger than any fear. We were the exiled once, but now we are the memory that binds the stars.